talk to you guys a little bit about financial modeling, why we build them, what we use them for, how we use them to hopefully impress investors, convince them to give us a bunch of money, and run our companies. So I will preface, I guess, the conversation with saying just that I can certainly just like talk at you guys for the next 90 minutes. I got the windpipe to do it, but I definitely prefer, kind of a more conversational approach to this. And so as we go, I'll start in kind of a presentation. We'll talk a little bit about why we build models and that kind of stuff. And then we're actually going to jump into some financial models and work in that. I would say that, come off mute, ask questions, say, hey, slow down, or hey, can we double tap on that? Like, would love to, just kind of interact with you guys. And ultimately, like, I'm here just to help you. So, if there are specific questions that you have, I'd like to hear them so we can help. And the other thing I'd like to say is that I'm just another founder and super open to like helping other founders, with what I'm good at. So like following this workshop, I'll be sending over like calendar link and just kind of contact information and stuff like that to Elizabeth to get circulated. If you think I could provide more value, like with a one-on-one later, if you have other questions, you want to email me, like that kind of stuff. I'm super open to help and happy to help. So yeah, that's a little bit, just kind of a preface here, and I'll share my screen. And we'll get started. So let's see.
Steven, before you start, can I say something really, really quick?
Please.
Rima Reddy, I need you to check the chat. You guys, this is really random. She and I used to be friends like over 10 years ago, and we just happen to be on this call right now. So
That's so funny. I didn't even see the chat. It's so good to see you again. So random.
Okay, we'll take it offline. But
I saw your face at some point. You were like, you looked like surprised or astonished. I was curious what that was going.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's so funny. Love it.
Okay. All right. Back to the show.
All right. Well, let's see. So objectives. Let's click through these. So first objective I really just want to kind of communicate is showing the power of a financial model. I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand really why you should have a financial model, and I think understanding why you should have one really like makes it easier to like go through the pain of actually getting one, because it can be a painful process, especially if you use spreadsheets and stuff, like kind of the old-fashioned way. But it'll definitely help you raise money. It'll definitely help you run your business better. Like it's something investors care a lot about, so it really helps you raise any kind of round of capital. And it's a good simulator. Basically, it can help you kind of understand what's coming around the bend, make better decisions for your company. If we can get at a shared understanding there, I want to teach you how to build a great financial model. So best practices, like what are some kind of take-home tips you can take away and use to get a model. We're definitely going to walk through some examples just so you can see like what does a great financial model look like. Another thing I'll share with Elizabeth is just like links to templates and resources just from us that could be really helpful to y'all. And then there's a few objectives around actually using the financial model. So, what does one look like? How do you use it in fundraising is what we're going to focus on today. So we're going to focus on like outside of the building and the theory and stuff like that. How do you use it in a fundraising environment as like a secret weapon that'll help you impress investors? And a big piece of that we'll get to is like how to run an investor meeting. Not like any old meeting, not like a pitch meeting, but how to run an investor meeting that's focused around your financial model. That's one of the main ways you'll leverage your model in the fundraising process, is like sitting down with an investor, going over it, communicating and like that your business and like telling the story of your company, that kind of thing. Before we get too far, I always think it's valuable to know like who's talking to you, I guess, and like what gives them any right to be talking about this stuff. So I'm Stephen Platford. I'm a 29-year-old entrepreneur out of Louisville, Kentucky. I have been in startups for 8 years. So I started a company back in 2013 called Fantasy Hub. It was a daily fantasy sports, like B2C gaming application. I ran that company for 3 years. We took it through Techstars Austin down in Austin, Texas. Raised about $1.5 million into that company, about 5,000 weekly active users. We ultimately did end up failing, though. We failed after about 3 years. In 2016, I transitioned to being a fractional head of finance for early stage startups. So I spent about 4 years really doing nothing but just like building and managing Excel-based financial models for early stage companies like seed to Series B, helping them raise capital, helping them manage the business, like helping them manage cash flow, that kind of thing. And that's actually how I met my co-founder, Logan. It's how we ended up starting Forecastr, which is a online software platform that helps founders get great financial models. So it's an alternative to Excel, to actually building and managing a great financial model. And this company, I've now been running for just over 2 years. We went full time about 15 months ago. We raised $750K in a pre-seed. About 15 months ago, we raised another $200K in October of last year. And then we actually just closed the money just hit the bank account last week, so super excited. We just closed $2.5 million seed round for the company last week. So we're up and off to the races, so to speak. And kind of startups and finance, like the intersection of those two things is my jam. It's where I spent my whole career. And I've built a boatload of models and that kind of stuff. So I think I can be really helpful just in helping you think through like how to get a model together, what the right model is for your business, not overcomplicating it, not oversimplifying it, like how to leverage it. All that kind of good stuff. So that is a little bit about me. What is Forecastr? Just to cover it, by the way, not going to pitch you on Forecastr today, not the purpose of this call. So you might see it referenced a few times, but I'm focusing this call on how to get a great financial model for your company, whether that be in Excel or Google Sheets or Forecastr or whatever. But Forecastr is just an alternative to Excel. It's not a spreadsheet. It's a standalone web app. It's like a CRM or QuickBooks or Asana or any of these other web apps, but it's specifically designed for early stage founders to use to build a great financial model for their company. So that is Forecastr. And that is kind of the end of the intro. So we'll start talking about content and stuff now. And this is a not a rhetorical question. This is a question to the group. So I'd love for folks to come off mute and just tell me in your own words, what do you think a financial model is?
Adulting.
Adulting?
Yeah.
I love it. Yep, that is absolutely correct. All right, who else? Okay, someone said projections in the chat. Absolutely. Projections are what I would call the output of a financial model. And a good financial model will spit out financial projections. Who else? Come on, who's not shy? You guys are all founders. You guys all are gonna get out there and say stuff all the time. Tool that lays out the underlying assumptions of your business. Yes, assumptions is a big piece of a financial model. Shaking out those assumptions, big piece. Anybody else? All right. Well, I will tell you what I would say a financial model is. and that is a business simulator. So I kind of walk you through an example here that I think can be really helpful in like framing a financial model in your mind. And that actually goes back to the automotive industry. So what you're looking at here is essentially a mock-up of a car, right? Like at a certain point in the past, in the 1900s, if you wanted to design a new car, you'd actually have to build an 8th scale Clary model of that car. You would then move on to building a full-scale model of that car. Then maybe you would take Chelsea over here, put her in the driver's seat, you know, and have her drive around a test track to figure out, hey, like, how does this car handle a 30 degree turn? You know, can this car do what we want it to do, and is it safe? And Chelsea, you know, drives the car around the track, and she takes the turn, and the car flips over inevitably, right? Because they just built an 8th scale clay model, and that's all they had. So then they go back to the drawing board, they, you know, lower the wheelbase or whatever, they lower the center of gravity, they do all these adjustments, they build a new car, you know, takes a ton of time. Like Chelsea maybe has had enough time to recover from her injuries at this point, so now she can get back in the car, you know, with the helmet and the 5-point seatbelt, drive the car around the track again, and maybe this time it does better, maybe it doesn't, and that's an iteration cycle goes on and on. This is kind of the process of essentially trying to get a car to market. And if you think about your business as that car, you know, doing it this way is a very time-consuming process. It takes a lot of capital, a lot of time, and people get hurt. And I think that's very much similar with if you're running a startup and you don't have a financial model. It can take a lot of time, a lot of money, and you can absolutely get hurt if you build a business without really having a good way of simulating how that business is going to perform in the market. And so today, you know, cars are built like this. We leverage software. We've got mathematical models and things like that we can use, CAD systems, so we can design cars very quickly in a digital environment. We can take them on a virtual test track, and we can see how they perform with the iteration cycle being really kind of in minutes and hours rather than months and years. It doesn't take a lot of money at all, relatively speaking, and nobody gets hurt. And I would say that that is absolutely how you should be looking at your financial model. It is a way for you to simulate your business, simulate how your business is going to perform, how you're going to acquire customers, how you're going to generate revenue, the people that you need to hire to do that, the cost structure, the expenses that you're going to incur, so that you can simulate the business and you can answer questions like, how much cash roughly do I need to survive for the next 2 years? Like, how many customers do I need to acquire, and how many leads do I need to generate to acquire those customers in order to get to 10K in MRR, in order to get to 100K in MRR, in order to, you know, insert milestone here. That's essentially what you're trying to do with a financial model, is gauge out, you know, what assumptions need to hold true in order for me to achieve my objectives. And then I can use that model to then communicate that game plan to investors and say, hey, this is how I'm going to do it. I got these assumptions. This is the output. This is how much money we make if these assumptions hold true. And then you also have this simulator that you can use to run your business. You know, like every month as you run your business and as you get real data from the market, you can take that data, you can put it into the financial model, and you can update the model on a monthly basis, which is one of the questions coming into this, which is around like, how often should I update my model and interact with it? You know, monthly is usually a good cadence, so kind of updating it monthly, tuning it to your business as you grow. So I think that's really what a financial model is. I think about it like a simulation of the business, and that's, you know, really kind of unlocks, I think, why we build it. It allows us to look into the future with the understanding that our assumptions may be wrong, the forecast may be wrong, but we can at least look into the future and kind of get an idea of what might happen to our business in a variety of scenarios, and then communicate that to investors. Another thing that I think is helpful to think about, kind of continuing with the car example, is like, you can think of your accounting system as essentially the rear view mirror. So a lot of people that I talk to say, hey, you know, I don't know if I really needed a financial model. I have QuickBooks. QuickBooks really is what looks backwards. So you're looking backwards into the past. That's accounting, your accounting stuff. You're trying to figure out, hey, how have we been doing? You know, how healthy have we been? That's all in the past. If you're looking at things like KPIs, dashboards, metrics, things like that, that's kind of like the dashboard of a car. It's kind of telling you how you're doing right now. It's saying, okay, we're either healthy or not healthy right now. We're either hitting our goals or not hitting our goals right now, which is a helpful kind of next step context from how we've been doing in the past, which is accounting. And then a financial model is essentially your windshield. This is how you look forward into the future of the business and say, okay, you know, we've been doing like this. That's accounting. Here right now, we're doing this. And based on all this information, we're going to make some assumptions about the future. And if those assumptions hold true, here's how we look into the future. And it either looks good or it looks bad or it looks meh. And based on that information and based on what you're seeing, you're going to make adjustments. You say, well, I don't like the customer acquisition that the model is forecasting. What do I need to do? What are the hard work that I need to do in order to generate more customers? Or maybe what price point do I need to hit my revenue objective? Like, how many people can I afford to hire if I don't want to raise more than $1 million? Like, all these questions and these scenarios, you can kind of explore and simulate in a financial model for your company. Now, I kind of already prefaced this one, so I hope to hear some answers here. I hope who's brave enough to come off mute and answer in their own words. Why do we build financial models? What's the purpose of it as a founder?
I feel like it's the opportunity to be proactive as opposed to reactive, to really think about the future of your company and really make sure that you're staying ahead of the curve, so that way you're minimizing any risk or any areas for potentially like losing money and things like that.
Yeah, I love that answer. Like, proactivity and just being proactive, 100%. Like, that's really what financial modeling a lot is about. It's about like kind of seeing issues before they happen, seeing potential issues before they happen, you know, cash out dates or like when you run out of cash, seeing that before it happens, seeing like whether or not you're going to hit your end of year goals before you actually get to the end of the year, like looking out to the future, being proactive about problem solving and giving yourself enough insight to actually try to do something about the problem while you can. I really like that point a lot. Who else? Don't everybody speak at once.
Just a simple way to stay organized. If things change, you're able to record it and be able to keep up, especially if you have a team. Also, everybody can see what's going on.
Yep. So there's a couple of things I really like there. One's kind of like a system of record and really like a single source of truth or a shared kind of environment where the team can see what I would argue is the financial health of the company. You know, just like you said, I think you can use a financial model when you're updating it monthly to actually record how your metrics have been trending on a monthly basis, how your financials have been trending on a monthly basis, a good system of record for how you've been doing. And if you do that for your entire model, you end up with what I call a single source of truth for all your financial metrics. Any metric that's related to the finances of the company is housed there in the model and is there for you to review and use to make assumptions about the future and eventually decisions. So yeah, I think that's a great point as well. I will say that at a minimum, for anybody who is getting out there to raise capital, which is most of us kind of in the startup world, it helps you impress investors and raise capital. So number one thing I think it helps you do is it helps you understand how much cash you need to actually run the business. A lot of people just kind of go into a round just picking a number. And there's a lot of risk to that. You might raise too much, you might raise too little. you really want to get specific with how much cash you need. And if you build out a hiring plan and an expense budget and a very conservative revenue forecast, it will basically output for you. It'll spit out for you how much cash you need to run the business for the next 18 months, 24 months, whatever your desired runway is. It'll help you tell your story. That's one thing I don't think a lot of people think about financial models like this, but I certainly do. And I've used them like this in fundraising environments very effectively. It's a storytelling tool. Like, investors are finance people. They speak the language of finance, so to speak. They're numbers people. So if you can speak to them in their language, it's gonna resonate really well. And so you can actually use your financial model as a storytelling tool. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But basically, you want to tell the story of your business. How are you going about acquiring customers? That should be represented in the model, and you can talk about that. You can say, hey, we're going to use these channels to acquire customers. Here's our assumptions about those channels, which generates this customer acquisition forecast. When we acquire customers, we sell them into these 3 product tiers. Here are the prices. Here's the expected churn. If these assumptions hold true, here's my annual revenue forecast. I'm telling the story of how my business works, how I acquire customers, how I monetize those customers, and I'm kind of painting the path to the pot of gold, so to speak. There's a mentor of mine who's really well known in the financial modeling world named Troy Hinikoff. He talks about that, with kind of painting this picture to the pot of gold. An investor wants to know there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and that you know how to get there. A financial model will really help an investor build confidence that you in fact do know how to get to this pot of gold. You're showing them how you can get to this pot of gold, and that gives them a lot of confidence. And I think Sophia said it, it's a risk mitigator. Like, in an investor's eyes, if you have a great financial model, you've just lowered the risk of the business, because I actually now have confidence that, hey, you actually understand how you're going to get there, and you can kind of tell a cohesive story. It helps you communicate control. So, you're in control of your business, you understand your business, you're communicating that to investors, and it separates you from the pack. This is true for anybody raising a seed round or earlier. If you're raising a Series A financial model is table stakes. It's not really going to separate you. A great one might, but just having one isn't. At the pre-seed seed level, it's still not commonplace, in the sense that, it's common, but it's not table stakes. Like, there's a lot of people that go out and raise rounds that don't have a model, so they kind of raise rounds in spite of that. If you have a great model, it really impresses investors. It separates you from the pack, and that's one of the main things I think you need to think about when you're raising is, like, there's a boatload of other startups that are approaching all these investors. Any kind of institutional investor has like a 1 out of 100 type of thing, where they need to have 99 no's and 1 yes. So you got to really separate yourself, and anything you can do to do that is going to help you. And having a great financial model really does that, in my experience. Having a great data room also does that, which is just like an online shareable file folder structure with all your diligence docs, corp docs, financing docs, all that kind of stuff. So definitely helps separate you. And then ultimately, from a business standpoint, helps you manage your runway, helps you prepare for various scenarios, helps you make better decisions. The output of a financial model, actually, someone already mentioned it. It's a set of financial projections. So the model you can think about as like the simulator. That's the engine. That's the thing that turns the assumptions into the projections. Like, you insert assumptions into the model does its thing, and it spits out a set of financial projections. Who can tell me the format of these financial projections? In what format should these financial projections be presented? All right, Michelle's got no clue. Who's got an idea? Who's brave enough to just throw out an idea? No judgment. Elizabeth says year 1 to 5. Yeah. It's a time period. Nobody's got any idea? Numbers on the page. Yeah. All right, y'all are a quiet bunch. Income statement.
As I
Go ahead.
mostly seen on pretty much just in Excel, and usually you do like a P&L historical couple years to projected 1 through 5 or whatever works.
Yeah, I think that's a good piece of it. So the format I'll argue is the 3 main financial statements. So there are 3 financial statements in finance: income statement, which is otherwise known as a P&L or a profit and loss, the balance sheet, and a statement of cash flow. So what you want is for your financial model to spit out basically these 3 statements on a monthly basis for the next 5 years. And then you're going to roll that up so you can look at it annually as well as a summary, but you want it forecasted monthly because monthly, like month is the cadence of finance, right? So your accounting is done monthly. Usually when you report it to the IRS and everything like that, you have monthly books that are closed on an annual basis. Monthly is kind of the desired cadence. And so you want a financial model that produces a 5-year forecast monthly so that you can see, and what month do I run out of cash? Not what year, because I might die within that year. Like, what month do I run out of cash? Like, if I want 18 months worth of runway, how much cash do I need? You know, like if I want to be at 100K in MRR to hit my Series A milestone in 12 months, you know, where do I need to be? So it's just kind of monthly context, goes out 5 years to really paint the big picture for investors. But it's structured under these financial statements: income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow. And that goes back to the investor piece, right? Like, investors are finance people. They speak the language of finance. This is the language of finance. This is the language that they understand. If you can present them a financial model that has all 3 statements monthly, that's summed up annually, you'll end up really impressing them, kind of, as long as the numbers that back it up are reasonable, the assumptions that back it up are reasonable. Yeah, you'll have a really good financial model to present to them. So I'm going to keep going on the questions here. So if you guys just keep being quiet, we'll just waste some time maybe. But what is the most important aspect of a financial model? Who's brave enough to throw out any ideas on that front?
I think reasonable assumptions about the business, that they're like based in some sort of logic and not just like, that's how you understand how your business works.
Yes, absolutely. So assumptions is without a doubt the most important. What piece of that, what subset, let's say, of assumptions do we think are the most important?
Well, it depends kind of by what business you're in or what channel you're going after. Like, how are you going to get your customers or stores of your product? Just how you build your revenue.
Bingo. I think revenue is by far the most important piece of it. For any early stage company, it's the most difficult to predict. It's the most difficult to control. It's the reason why most businesses fail, is because they fail to produce sufficient revenue, either to cover their expenses and become profitable, or to convince investors to invest in them. It's revenue is where the rubber meets the road. And what I a lot of times see in financial modeling is people spend a bunch of time detailing all their expenses and getting all detailed there, which is great. You should do that because expenses are controllable. You can control them. So you should forecast them with detail in the model, because you have complete and total confidence that, yes, in fact, that is how much money you'll need from an expense perspective. But the thing that's most interesting in a model is, what are your revenue assumptions? What are your assumptions regarding lead generation, regarding customer acquisition, regarding monetization, regarding customer retention? These types of assumptions are essentially where your model is going to live or die. In a fundraising scenario, it's almost exclusively what your investors will care about, is digging into your revenue assumptions. Why are you making these assumptions? Are they reasonable? What output do they generate? Expense assumptions are much less interesting to investors. And if you can really understand your revenue formula, it will allow you to actually project your revenue with a lot greater level of accuracy. So what I mean by revenue formula, and we'll get into it in a second, is actually describing how you generate revenue. So not just saying, hey, we're going to get 10 customers a month and then we're going to grow it by 10% a month, and on average customers pay us $100. Like, you actually want to get in and say, okay, what are the channels that you're using to drive acquisition? What does that funnel look like? You know, if it's a paid ads funnel, if it's an organic funnel, if it's a influencer marketing funnel, like, how does that funnel actually work? How can I describe that and how it works so that I can actually forecast like the mechanics of that funnel, you know, a number of leads, a conversion rate, things like that, levers I can manipulate. That gives me a customer forecast. And then how do I actually monetize those customers? Do they buy a subscription? Do they buy e-commerce? Do they repeat purchase? Or do they only buy once? Like, what's their churn behavior look like? Like, you're wanting to basically think about that and describe that mathematically in the financial model to truly understand your revenue formula. And then, usually on the front end that like all your assumptions into that are probably wrong, but that's okay because you've set up this model, and this model is just turning inputs into outputs. And so over time, you're going to replace those inputs with better and better inputs based on better and better market data. Then as you do that, your model is going to still be cranking out output, but it's going to crank out output that's more and more and more dialed in to the realities of your business and the market. So that's kind of how that process is designed and worked. And revenue, absolutely the most important. So I'm just going to walk through an example of what this looks like. This is where, so for anyone who hasn't built a financial model already for their business, this is where you should start. You should start on a whiteboard, on a piece of paper, on a note doc, whatever, just sketching out what your revenue formula is. And we're going to walk through that for an example company like a SaaS company. So, at the simplest level, if you're a subscription-based business, your revenue is going to equal the monthly price that your customers pay you multiplied by the number of subscribers that you have at any given time. Now, purple is an input here. So purple, we're going to say, okay, well, price, we pretty much control that. The market tells us what we should price, but we can control that. We can charge more, we can charge less. That's under our control. So that's going to be an input. We're going to key that into the model. Subscribers, I can't control. I can't force people to buy. I can't force people to stay. I don't know how many subscribers I'm going to get. So I need to break that down. I need to say, well, what is subscribers built of? Well, subscribers would be equal to the subscribers I have at the beginning of the month minus the subscribers that I lose due to churn, plus the subscribers that I get at the through customer acquisition, right? Like at a high level, that's what's going into this number. If I break that down again, the subscriptions I have at the beginning of the month, that's known, that's in the past at this point. The ones that I lose is simply the ones at the beginning of the month multiplied by my churn rate, which I don't have control over, but I can do Google searches to figure it out, or I can look at historical data to figure it out. So that's going to be an input. And then new subscribers is a little bit trickier. New subscribers is really a function of like, well, where are these subscribers coming from and what channels are they converting from? So maybe I use Google ads or just Google SEO, email marketing and Facebook ads, something like that. I could break new subscriptions into these channels. And then I got to break those channels down again. And I could say, well, maybe the new subs from Google is a function of the traffic I'm getting from Google multiplied by a conversion rate. Same for Facebook. Maybe for email, it's like the mailing list size times the response rate times the conversion rate, something like that. You're trying to figure out what the mechanics of these channels are. And then you might drill down one final time and say, well, maybe for Facebook ads, the traffic that I generate is actually a function of my monthly budget that I spend divided by the cost per click that I expect to get on these advertisements. And so in this way, I'm now breaking, this top piece down, which is very kind of high level and not that useful, into a set of metrics. These are all metrics. Churn rate is a metric, budget, cost per click, conversion rate, your traffic. I've got all these metrics now that work together mathematically to produce my revenue forecast. And I've got a lot more levers I can pull to mess around with it. I can mess around with the budget or the conversion or the churn and actually shape my revenue forecast And now I actually have my KPIs too. These purple inputs, these are my KPIs. I should be tracking these on a monthly basis. I should be updating them on a monthly basis, to figure out if I'm beating or not beating my forecast. So hopefully that,
I have a quick
yes,
question.
please.
What for your inputs, what do you say when you're originally benchmarking? How do you go about finding churn, conversion, making a reasonable beginning input?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and we get this on a lot. So it's just sort of like assumption validity, like how do I pick my assumptions? How do I know if they're right or not? That kind of stuff. There's no silver bullet to kind of setting those original assumptions. I'll talk to you how to do that. The most important thing I would say though is get the model right, get the structure right, and just commit yourself to the process of tracking against these assumptions in reality. So setting up a system where you can actually track real data as you grow your company and replace your guesses on the front end with actual data from the market as you go. So that's the most important piece. But in terms of setting those initial assumptions, it should really just come from your own personal sentiment or your own personal experience, just publicly available data. So Google searching, churn rate for SaaS product under $100, or conversion rate for enterprise sales of, medical devices or something like that. Like just doing some Google searching, looking around, maybe talking to other founders, in your space, asking mentors like of this, this community or others, just kind of getting some, reasonable data that way. It's like anecdotal, and just recognizing that it is anecdotal and you're not going to subscribe to it fully. You're just going to say, okay, this seems reasonable enough to put in for now, but I'm going to commit myself to actually track against this and replace that guess with real data as I get it.
And this may be like way too specific, but just in your opinion, like that brought up a question, when you're benchmarking and you're searching, is it more important to, you find you get better benchmarks if you're looking, choose industry comps or like ticket size comps if it's a subscription? Like are like average order value kind of like the size of it, or the industry is more important, or both? Does
I would say generally speaking, just like the more contextual the benchmark, the better, basically. So like, I mean, when you're thinking about, like, for example, average order, you should be thinking about what type of product you are, like what type of product you sell, what industry you're in, and trying to find, this kind of anecdotal data, blog post, whatever, as close to that as possible. Like the smaller the delta between the type of company you are, the type of product, the type of whatever, and the type of company that this, this data is coming from, the more, reasonable it's going to be. So there's not like a perfect answer for that, but you just want to try to, it's just all about context. Like you want to try to find companies that are very, very similar to you, or data sets that are very similar to you. So like, I don't think there's a lot of value in, for example, like looking at public companies and like their cost structures or their whatever. It's like, unless you're a really big company, you really kind of want to look at just other startups, other companies that are similar to you, hitting up their founders, hitting up, communities, and just trying to ask that. But ultimately, like, I think there's a lot of value in just like greasing the skids and going with your gut. Just like go with your gut and just commit yourself to with the understanding that like it's wrong. You're not pretending it's right, and that's not even the point. The point is just getting something started that like seems somewhat intelligible, which like your gut, a lot of times, if you have some experience, can be a good reliable factor for, and just replace it. Just replace it as you get good data. Even 2 or 3 months into a product being in the market, you can get some good guidelines for your business specifically, and start to update. Great question, by the way. Okay, so I see somebody asked about a real example. We're going to dive into a financial model now. So take like a minute or two and just read about this business, because it's the model that I'm going to load up here in a second for us. And we're just going to use it as an example, both of what a great financial model looks like, but also of like how we use a financial model to understand our business and make decisions. Like I'll kind of go through a few thought experiments there. And spoiler alert, I am going to ask more questions. So yeah, speak out.
This is just for us to learn about the company, correct? This is not their financial model, correct?
Yeah, yes, that is correct. Exactly. Yeah, there's just a little snapshot about the company, just get some context on the company. We're about to dive into their financial model. That's correct.
Okay, perfect.
And so this is it's a mock company theorized by Troy, who's this financial modeling mentor I was telling you guys about. It's a subscription box company, everything you need for your man cave kind of thing, $29.99, monthly subscription. You get new products every month in a box. And you can see here, they grow through word of mouth, advertising on Google and Facebook, that kind of thing. So we're going to jump into their model here. Let me pull this up. And I think I shared my whole screen. So you should be seeing what seems like a financial model now. If not, please let me know. But this is a financial model for Dollar Cave Club. This is what I would argue is a very good model. This is a model that would allow the founders of Dollar Cave Club to raise money, I think, very effectively. It also allows them to make decisions very well, and we'll kind of look at why, or kind of like what are the bones of a good model. So you can see there's only 5 tabs. It doesn't have to be crazy complex in order to be a good model. Lots of people's models have tons of tabs and whatnot. Like doesn't have to be like that. You got an overview tab, very simple, just kind of shows puts a nice little face on the model. You have an assumptions tab. This all kind of collapses stuff here so you can see what we're looking at, but basically you have all your assumptions in one page. So we have these little accordion sections where we can make assumptions about customer acquisition, revenue, our hiring plan, expenses, everything on the balance sheet. And it's all in one page. It's got one page of assumptions, very simple. I make a bunch of assumptions about my business. And when I do that, it's going to spit out a set of financial statements. So I'm going to get an income statement. You can see it's shown on a monthly basis. It goes out the next 5 years, just like we were talking about. Shows revenue, costs, all that kind of stuff. As I keep scrolling down here, you'll see a balance sheet. So this is where we track, what we own as a company, what we owe as a company, and what is left over. So it's a chart of accounts, if you will. And then the statement of cash flows. And this is what kind of reconciles the two statements that, hey, how much cash did we get or how much cash did we burn in any given month? And most importantly, what is our resulting cash flow and does it stay positive? Because if it doesn't, that's a problem for us, right? That means we died. So you have a nice set of monthly financial statements here that go out the next 5 years. And then you've got a summary where you just, pull this stuff up annually and look at it at a higher level. And then there's graphs and things like that we can use to visualize the model. So that is kind of the layout and the architecture, if you will, of a great financial model. What we're going to do now is we're going to run a little experiment with us as a team. So we're going to pretend that we have this model. We've built this model. We are the founding team of Dollar Cave Club. And we have some questions that we want to ask of ourselves. So I'm going to open this model up in 2 different windows here, just so we can play around with this. I'm going to do this. And what we're going to do is I'm going to set this one to show us the annual picture. So this is like the annual summarized income statement and cash flow. And then over here, we've got all the assumptions. So you'll be able to see, like, if I change an assumption, like the churn assumption from 4 to 10%, what you'll see is that over here, once this processes, this will all update with information. And we'll have a new set of projections. You see now these are in the negatives. We're losing money. We've lost money. We've died as a business, so to speak. But we're going to go back here and put this at 4%. So with this business, we are up and in the market, and we have some questions. Like, for example, we're currently charging $29.99 for our product. We could ask ourselves, well, what if we raise the price by 33%? So what if we raise the price to $39.99? Then we can say, okay, what impact does that have on our cash flow? Do we get 33% more cash? Do we get more than 33% more cash, or less than 33% more cash, based on a 33% change in our price? So we're charging 33% more. Chat or come off mute. Who thinks that we'll get, more, less, or equal in terms of, like, growth of our cash, and why? Who feels like they have no clue?
I have a guess.
Please.
I think you'll get more, but you're not going to get 33% more, because by increasing your price, you're probably going to alienate some consumers.
I think that's a great point. So what you just identified there is that there's kind of an inverse reaction between price and other things like churn and conversion. If we increase price, churn will likely increase, conversion will likely decrease. And so you're totally right. In this fictitious world, which is the world that we get to live in modeling, we're going to say, what if that didn't happen? What if churn stayed the same? What if conversion stayed the same? What if we just changed the price and nothing else changed? It's a pretty hard question to answer, and that's by design. Like, financial models are like heavy lifters, right? Like, they do a bunch of math and they can tell us. So we can key in that 39. We don't have to trust our judgment. We can just look and see, and boom, we actually get a lot more cash. We were at 700,000 before. Now we're at 1.6 million. We actually over doubled the amount of cash in our bank account by the end of year 5. And the reason for that is actually that there's kind of a compounding effect here where you're increasing your price. That price increase is holding true, and your variable costs, any costs that are like cost of the product or like cost of payment processing or things like that, those are going to scale along with that price increase. But things like the number of people that you have, things like your rent, things like that are more like fixed or indirect costs, those are going to stay flat. And so that increase in price is just going to kind of accumulate more and more cash in the bank account over the course of 5 years. And it's actually very, very meaningful for us. It means we get twice as much cash in the bank account. But now, really good point regarding like churn and conversion. Like, probably not going to be able to increase price without an increase in churn. So let's go to that. Let's say that on the churn side, we're currently at 4%. So let's increase that by 33%. Let's say churn increases by 33%, which is to say it goes up to 5.33. Now, our cash was at 700,000 originally at the end of year 2024. Now it's at 1.6. We should be counterbalancing. We increased price by 33%. We're now going to increase churn by the same amount, by 33%. Are we going to go back to 700,000? Are we going to go below 700,000? Are we going to have more than 700,000 in cash at the end of the model? What do y'all think, and why? More. I think we'll have an increase. Okay, so we'll still have more than 700,000. If you're willing to come off mute, I'd be curious to know why you think that. But if not, it's okay too.
Still a tough audience. Because I feel if you have an increase in your subscribers, that ultimately, if I'm subscribing to something, I will. That's more money. So if you're bringing in more income with more subscribers equals more revenue. So you should have more. I don't know how much more, but you should have a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in this case, we're actually increasing the churn rate. So in theory, we're actually going to have less subscribers. We're going to have more people churning, and so less people sticking around. But we can hit, enter, and we can see what it does. It was at 700,000 originally before we did anything. Now we've increased the price. We've increased churn as well to kind of counterbalance that, but we're still in the green, right? Like we're still at 1.1, almost 1.2 million over and above the 700,000 that we started with. And we can use the model to figure out like what our breakpoints are. And this is the magic of financial modeling. Like basically, if we as a business owner are running this company and we're saying, well, look, I obviously want to make more money. So like, let's increase the price to $39.99. We can't do that in isolation. So what we can do is we can ask ourselves, at what level of churn do I break even on that? Basically, like, which tells me, it gives me a guideline as a business owner. Like I can run an A/B test, I can increase my price to $39.99, and as long as churn stays below X, then I win. Basically, then I get more money, I achieve my objective. And we can use the financial model to figure out what that X is. So it's not 5.3 because we're still in the green. I can make this 6. And we can see if that puts us in the green or not still. And we're at 975. I can make it 7. And I can ask myself if that puts us in the green, and that's basically there. Like very close, pretty much right there. So I can now functionally tell my team, or I myself can execute this. I can say, okay, if we want to increase price, we need to keep churn underneath 7%. As long as we keep it underneath 7%, we're going to be doing better off as a company. If it goes above 7%, nope, should not increase churn, or shouldn't increase price, because that's actually going to negatively affect the company. And it's these kinds of insights all throughout the model, and these kinds of like question and answer scenarios, that kind of stuff that you can do. Then I'm just reading Melody's question here. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right, Melanie. So her question was, as long as we lose less than this many customers, we're fine with the price increase. That's exactly right. We're saying, hey, these are our parameters. And this is how we can run the business. Alternatively, we might set another scenario. We might say, well, what if churn stays the same, because we think once someone buys, they don't care if it's 29 or 39, but what really is going to be the problem is conversion. We think conversion is actually what's going to get hit. So what if I leave the price increase, turn churn back, and then say, well, what if I get 6 or 33% less conversion? So maybe this is 0.66, this is 1, this is 1.33, this is 0.2. Then what happens? And I can see that if our conversion takes the same hit, a 33% hit, it really screws us as a company. Like we've run out of money in 2022. We never catch up. Our business really suffers. And so I can say, okay, well, there's definitely like conversion is what feels like now one of my most important metrics. It's more, my business is more sensitive to conversion than it is to churn or price. So that tells me as a founder, as a business owner, conversion should be my focus. Like I should focus on conversion. I should optimize for conversion. If I can get better conversion rates, that's going to generate more revenue. That's going to generate more value in my company.
Question that I guess it's more of a question of how much detail do you put in this? Wouldn't it be helpful to do these metrics by year, so you could plan out like I will raise the price in year 3, or do that, or do you find that's gets to be too many assumptions and is unhelpful. Because this, you have to now set the same assumption for 5 years, which doesn't give too much flexibility.
Yeah, it's a tremendous question, and the answer really lies in like essentially it's individual in the sense that from a financial modeling and from like an accuracy perspective, you're definitely better off using what I call time-based assumptions rather than snapshots. So a snapshot would be I input the price, it's the price forever. Time-based is like either yearly or even on a monthly basis. There's like a line of input that goes out into the future. You can actually see it. There's some of the model like up here, you see these green is input, and you can see that's like an input all the way across as I scroll. Those are these time-based assumptions, and they are much more powerful because they're much more accurate. Like that's how your business works. The downside of that is that it also is more cumbersome. It's more cumbersome. There's more inputs. There's more to manage, at least in a spreadsheet. It's one of, I think, the big benefits of our platform of Forecastr is you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. We can use the power of just like UI UX to essentially abstract a lot of that stuff away and allow you to have the best of both worlds. But in a spreadsheet, you're forced to pick a direction. And so what I like to suggest to people is don't overcomplicate it out of the gate. Just get a simple model that explains your business, use a lot of snapshot assumptions, set that model up, start using it, start getting comfortable. Once you are comfortable with that and you're using it and you like it and you can present it, then you can start to optimize it. Then you can say, well, my price might not be the same anymore. So I'm gonna, maybe create another row. I'm gonna create an input line for that. I'm gonna, shape that up the way I want. And then I'm gonna change that formula to rather to be just all grabbed off that one cell. I'm gonna now point it to this row of cells, and you're kind of upgrading your model in the way that you would think about your product, MVP model out of the gate, something simple, something that works, track it against the market, see how your business is performing in it, and then expand the model and get deeper and get more, more granular as you go.
Thanks, super helpful. I think that's part of the art of model building is knowing when to drill into detail and
Yes.
make it actually useful. Like at the end of the day, this is to be useful for the business.
Yeah, exactly. It's so true. It is such an art too. And I think the most helpful framing for me is just thinking about what like if I close my eyes, what are the most important metrics that I care about, and those important metrics, those really important metrics, those are the ones that you might want to dive deep into. Things that don't matter that much, don't dive too deep in it. So like for me, for my business, I'm an annual SaaS business. We sell annual subscriptions to our software. I care about price. I care about churn. I care about conversion. I care about top of funnel. Those are the assumptions that really matter to me. So I'm going to dig in on those. I also care about my hiring plan. Like most of my expenses as a software business is people. So I'm kind of thinking those core assumptions on revenue side, let's drill deep there. Let's go really deep on the hiring plan because that's a big cost piece of my business. Other stuff like rent and whatever, like I'm just going to represent in the model, but I'm not going to spend that much time on because it's really not that important. Services as well. We have like a services arm, not that important. So that's kind of how I think that kind of the process you got to go through to figure out what to do. And that's also somewhere you can leverage me. You can reach out and say, hey, I got my model, but I'm not sure where I should drill in. Like maybe you can help, and I would love to help on that stuff. So we'll keep rolling here because I know we got 30 minutes left. But I'd say like hopefully this was helpful in kind of communicating just like the value of financial model, and I think like what kind of insights and like you can get from it, the decisions you can make using it, and like really why you should build one. I think what I'd like to do next is spend a little bit of time going through some financial models that are like just kind of good examples, kind of showing you guys like what it looks like to get that. By the way, we absolutely will be sharing this example model and model templates and resources after this. So I'll send that over to Elizabeth to send around. So you'll definitely get those resources. And there's a bunch of others that I won't send you either. So like I'll send you all that stuff. if you don't find what you need in there, like hit me up and say, hey, I'm this type of business. Do you have something? I almost guarantee you that we do. So super, yeah, I mean, that's easy for us to do. So let me do this. Let me, I guess, close out of this. Let me minimize this for a second, and we will click through. So this is not meant to be like all encompassing. It's just meant to be an overview of, like, generally speaking, how to go about it. There's a lot of resources on this stuff that will get sent to you, which I think can be more helpful in the nitty gritty of how to build it. But I'm just kind of giving an overall framing. Like, number one thing you should do before you put any pen to paper, so to speak, is just get an understanding of your revenue formula. Go through that thought exercise that we went through, saying, what is revenue equal for me? How can I break revenue down into individual metrics that drive revenue and relate those with math? It doesn't need to be super complicated, you know, just try to get a feel for how your revenue actually works mechanically. Once you have that, you want to start forecasting. And the first thing you should forecast, in my opinion, is customer acquisition. Don't worry about any other piece of the business. Just say, how do people find out about me? How do they buy from me? Go through that thought experiment in your head, try to represent it in the model. Well, I get traffic organically. Well, how can I forecast that? Well, I know I got 1,000, people to my website last month, so I can start from there. And if I look in Google Analytics over the last 3 months, I averaged a month-over-month growth rate of organic traffic of 8%. So I'm going to key in 8% and assume that that just holds true going forward. And then I'm going to say, well, maybe only 0.5% of those people, though, actually convert to becoming a customer. So I'm going to put in a 0.5% conversion rate, do multiplication. There's my customers. Or maybe I say, well, I'm a sales business, actually, and I have 3 salespeople right now. Each of them have 50 leads per month that they manage. So 3 times 50 is 150. They get 20% of those to a demo, so that's 30. They get 10% of those to a customer, so that's 3. You're like, you're going through this calculus and you're describing it in the model. And you're doing that for all the main ways you use to acquire customers so that you can get a customer acquisition forecast. You're then taking those customers and you're saying, well, how do I monetize them? Like, what products do I sell them? How do they break out amongst those products? How do they pay me monthly, annually, quarterly, beginning or ending of a service contract, whatever it is? What's their repeat purchase behavior? Do they buy every month? Do they buy every quarter? Do they buy sporadically? How can I describe that? Like, you're kind of going through that exercise, forecasting your revenue. And then someone asked about overhead. You're kind of going down from there and you're saying, okay, what are the direct expenses that I need when I make money? Well, I got payment processing. I got this, I got that. Represent those in the model. Maybe use like a percentage of revenue to like tie it to revenue because they're usually related. Then is your overhead, so who do I need to hire? Who do I have right now? Who do I need to hire to grow my business? What roles do I need to fill? And what other overhead do I have? Do I have rent? Do I have travel? What about accounting and legal? What about software subscriptions? What about general office expenses? Maybe a miscellaneous category for a buffer. I'm just kind of going through a mental checklist of what I might spend money on. I'm forecasting those either just like straight line. I might just be saying, hey, I spend $5,000 a month on it. Or I tie it to revenue, or I tie it to people. Maybe it's $300 a person a month and you're tying it to how many people you have. There's kind of a variety of ways you can do that. Then, to be honest, gets the tricky part where you have to forecast things like assets, liabilities, and equity. It's a lot less clear because it's a lot less tangible in a sense. But I do think it's really important, especially if you have, any kind of delayed payment schedule or physical products or anything like that. And it's just part of finances. It's part of getting after what you really want, which is like, how much cash flow, like how much cash do I have and how long is my runway? Like, that's the answer usually people care about a lot. And unless you get a balance sheet, it's hard to really get that answer. So you got to forecast that stuff. That's stuff that we can definitely talk through and we got some resources on. And then once you get through step 6, like, you've got your financial model. It's just a matter of like structuring it into statements. And that's where you can build an income statement, a balance sheet and cash flow statement, monthly out 5 years, like we talked about. And then you can build a summarized version of that annually. In a lot of the resources that we'll share with you, a lot of this stuff is kind of shortcutted. A lot of the structures there, you have to just really customize your revenue forecast and all that kind of stuff. So that can be helpful. And then again, if anybody's interested in Forecastr, a lot of this is done for you. It's a lot easier in Forecastr as well. So that's obviously something that y'all can explore. As far as how we leverage a financial model in fundraising, and then we're going to go into some more examples. We've talked about this a little bit, but I'll just kind of double tap on something here, which is that actually someone mentioned, I think it might have been Sophia earlier, which is like risk mitigation. And it's really like risk mitigation and like kind of pot of gold. I call it being a good shepherd. So like as an investor, I care about risk mitigation. I want to minimize my risk in an inherently risky environment. I do that by really making sure that the founders that I'm investing in have their head on straight. They have a good business opportunity with credible traction, and they know how to run the business. They're not going to run it into the ground. Like that's the number one thing I really care about outside of like its ability to be a huge business. And so investors want to have confidence in you. They want to trust you. They want to know that you're going to be a good shepherd of their money, because most companies died by running out of money. And so a financial model will really help you do that. If you present it well and it's thought out, it will communicate to the investor that you understand your business, that you can communicate and articulate your business, that you understand how much money you need and you're raising a specific amount of capital for specific objectives and milestones. It shows that you can actually mitigate the risk of the company, avoid obstacles. And then ultimately, like if you do your job right, the financial model should paint the picture of very concretely how you're going to get from where you are today to a huge company with a big exit or whatever it is that your objective is. Like your financial model should paint how you get to that objective, and therefore really kind of start to paint the picture for the investor. Hey, like this isn't just theory. This team's actually thought about how they're going to get from point A to B to C to D to E to pot of gold. And that like drawing that line of logic is what builds confidence, is what builds trust, it's what closes checks. So I think you should use your financial model as a closer. You shouldn't lead with it. You should lead with you and how awesome you are and your vision for the company and all that kind of stuff. But once you've gotten someone on the hook, the financial model is the closer. That's what reels them in. That's what finishes the job. Is saying, look, this isn't all smoke and mirrors. Yeah, this is a super cool company, and yeah, we got a big vision, but we got the blocking and tackling to back it up, and we know how we can run this thing. So, as far as what an investor grade financial model looks like, there's some simple like kind of core stuff. Basically, one-stop shop assumptions. There should be somewhere in the model where all your assumptions live, section of the model, what have you. Put all your assumptions in one place so an investor can kind of peruse through it and understand the core assumptions that drive the model. That's what they're essentially trying to subscribe to or believe in is your assumptions. Those assumptions should power a set of detailed monthly financials. So income statement, balance sheet, cash flow, monthly out 5 years. Those financial statements should roll up into an annual view, bird's eye. I can from a distance be like, hey, is this business worth it? And then graphs and charts, thoughtful tab organization, just user friendliness. Like investor didn't build the model, so you want to try to make it friendly for them to digest it. They might see a lot of models all over the place, you know, some visuals, they speak 1,000 words, and just being thoughtful with how you're organizing things, how you're displaying things, that will help an investor focus on what's important, which is like your assumptions, and not be losing a bunch of cognitive energy trying to figure out what's going on in your model. So we will walk through a few more here. So like I'll walk you through my financial model. Like, I mean, my financial model is obviously in my software, and I'll show you that too. But even just at an Excel level, like I can click into my financial model and go into the seed round, open this up. So, you know, my financial model in Excel is here, or in Google Sheets is here. You can see I have a nice table of contents. You know, it's got a link to my website. It's got my logo once that pops up. It's got hot links to different tabs in the model where various information lives. We've got a metrics and assumptions tab. This is that one-stop assumptions. And by the way, the resources that you get, the template is like super similar to this. So like, this is more or less what you're going to get, just something that you'll need to like customize to your business. But I've got an assumptions tab. I've got all my information right here on this assumptions tab. I can click into each one. And like I said, start with customer acquisition, right? You can see in gray, you know, where we were tracking historical data before we switched over into our software. You can see I've got all these different channels represented and how I'm forecasting each channel individually to figure out very concretely how I'm driving leads within each one of these channels. I can scroll down and see I've got a funnel where I'm getting leads from all these channels. I've got different conversion rates for each channel. I'm tracking my customer acquisition by channel. So I've got a very good understanding of how I'm going to actually generate these customers. I can look at revenue. I've got it broken out between our product tiers, churn for each product tier, you know, our price, which you can see now, these are time-based assumptions. So I can increase price over time. You know, as I scroll out, you'll see those prices increase. So those that we all have in the model, get a good understanding of monetization. I can keep scrolling down. I can see, you know, managed services, how we do that. Then I get into costs, you know, how we do that. We got these percentage of revenue assumptions, hiring plan, super important. You know, we got all the people, how much money we make, all this stuff. I've got some hires that like scale automatically. So sales team, I'm going to need a boatload of them, 20 deals closed per month. They just get hired as I grow the company. On and down the road. Then you got all your operating expenses as well. So you've got kind of this one-stop shop of all your assumptions, very easy, very, very thoughtful in its layout, very easy to step through one after the other, walk an investor through it, and then say, look, if you agree with all those assumptions, you know, I've got a very detailed set of monthly financials that track historical data as well as forecasted data. You know, I think, you know, here we are right now at, which actually is pretty accurate. So we're about just over 10,000 in monthly revenue right now. So trying to get to 11 by the end of next month, you know, trying to get to 46,000 by the end of the year. So this is that detailed monthly financial picture. And then I can actually zoom out even farther and say, look, this is our annual picture. You know, we expect to scale up to 27 million in revenue by the end of 2025. We expect to lose money for the next 4 years because we're going for venture scale. Then we'll start turning a profit. You know, we think that we need to raise 2.5 million on a Series C, then 6 million on a Series A. Like, you're kind of walking an investor through that, and you've got it, you know, laid out here, all the kind of core elements in place. Just to kind of show you what it looks like. In Forecastr, you have the same thing. So this may seem familiar as we go through it. You have an assumptions section where all your assumptions live. You know, you can go to customer acquisition. You've got all those funnels just like we had in the model. We can drill into each one and see how each funnel works, and the metrics that build each funnel mathematically works very similarly. You know, we can add funnels. We can also click over to revenue streams. Like, we can drill into specific revenue streams and all the metrics that drive that, you know, churn and price, etc. I can click into the hiring plan. Like, I'm drilling in just in the same way, and then I can zoom out to a monthly set of financial statements, income statement, balance sheet, cash flow statement, all there and organized for the investor. And I can flip it to an annual view as well and kind of zoom out and say, hey, you know, what does our business look like annually if we, you know, if our assumptions hold true. So you can see that here as well. So yeah, those are some examples, I think, of what a good financial model looks like. You know, tool aside, it's just assumptions in one place, detailed monthly financials, income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow, summarized annual financials, and as much detail with respect to customer acquisition and revenue as you can muster, so to speak. So that's kind of the model walkthrough stuff. A couple more things here, and then we'll cut it off and have plenty of time for questions. So, oh, and then here's one. As you grow, do you add in actual data versus assumed data? Yes, actually. So Chelsea, yes, absolutely. That's one of the biggest values of a financial model is as you go through the months, each month, when a month falls from future into the past, you should update that month with the actual assumptions, like with the actual data. Like, my price for this month was this, my churn was this, my conversion was this, my salaries were this, my rent was that. And you're looking at that and you're saying, well, I forecasted this. This is what actually happened. Maybe some stuff was off. So I'm going to tweak some assumptions about the future. Now I've got a slightly more accurate model. Rinse and repeat the next month and the next month and the next month. After like 6 to 9 months, you'd be surprised at how dialed in these models get if you're diligent about it. So that's a great question. And yes, please do that. With regards to how to use it in fundraising, I talked a little bit about this. So I don't like, it shouldn't be something you lead with. It's not the sexy part of your business. It's the you know, the meat and potatoes, so to speak. It's like, you know, you lead with your vision, your pitch, your team, all that kind of stuff. You get somebody excited about your business, you get them interested in your business, and then you want to, and I think, like, entice the investor. So like essentially including snapshots of your model in the pitch deck. So as you're going through your story, as you're telling it, you're enticing the investor by what they care about. They care about numbers. You're enticing them to say, where'd you get those numbers? Like, where did you get those projections? And you're going to say, well, I'd actually love to walk you through my detailed financial model, which I have, which backs up these projections. And if you'd be down to spend some more time to do that, I think that'd be a great use of our time. That's really good. That means you got an investor on the hook. So kind of entice them by teasing the model out in the deck. I mentioned a data room. If you don't know what a data room is, it's just like a Google Drive or Dropbox. You have a bunch of files and you can put in all sorts of stuff that investors care about for diligence, you know, legal docs, historical financials, people docs, like growth plans, product demos, that kind of stuff. If you're using a spreadsheet model, you should include it in your data room, password protected. If you're using a model like Forecastr that's not in a spreadsheet, I usually will take snapshots from it and put it in like a PDF that they can click into and say, hey, if you want more information, like, hit us up. But if you do include it as a spreadsheet, I like to password protect it. So an investor sees it and they're like, oh yeah, I want to check it out, but they can't, they need a password and they got to go through you to get that. So they're going to ask you for it and you're not going to give it to them. You're going to say, let me present this to you because I really want you to understand our business and I want to communicate to you my mastery of my own business. That is where the magic happens. And that's really the final point, is you don't want a model to live alone. There's a very specific reason for that. And it's actually very just like human behavioral and psychological. When people consume information, they make opinions, they form opinions around it. Their initial opinion is very difficult to uproot once it's been formed. So you want to be there when the opinion is being formed about your business so that you can shape it to your liking. Same reason why I never suggest people send a pitch deck over without pitching it first. Like, pitch the deck, present the model, shape the opinion of the investor with your narrative. You want to be conveying a certain story, telling a narrative, and you want to be shaping their opinion so that that opinion is favorable to you. So force the meeting. If someone isn't willing to meet with you, they're not going to invest in you. They're not that interested in you. That's just the way it is. So use that to force the meeting and say, look, I understand how important it is, you know, for me to understand my business. I want to communicate that to you. I'd love to meet with you. So meet with them. When you meet with them and go over the model, it's very important that you're not defending the model. The model is not your friend. The investor is your friend. You are with the investor versus the model. It's not you and the model versus the investor. The model is just a model. And you're sitting there with the investor and say, look, I built this model. It's pretty awesome. Like, I'm not delusional. I understand that it's probably wrong, but it accurately conveys how my business works. And I want to walk you through that. And as I'm walking you through that, we can play around with stuff. We can change the price. We can change the churn. We can change the salaries. Like, we can change whatever we want, and we can see what impact that has on the business. Crawl, walk, run, which means, like, don't assume that your investor just like knows everything about your business and your financial model when you start doing this. Like, an investor is seeing this cold. They've not seen this model before. They've maybe don't know that much about your business. So be very methodical about how you walk through it. Like, well, you know, here's the layout of the model, Mr. Investor. You know, here's customer acquisition. Here's how we do that. Here's revenue. Here's how we do that. Like, kind of like the way that I walked y'all through, kind of showing you what a good financial model looks like. do the same thing with your investors. Take time to do that. Don't go too fast. Focus almost exclusively on the revenue side. Investors don't care that much about costs. Costs are important, but revenue is way more important. So focus on revenue. Communicate to the investor that you understand how you're going to generate it. You understand how you're going to acquire customers. You understand what it's going to take to optimize. You understand your revenue formula. Know what levers you can pull. So this is really valuable. Sometimes an investor will be like, I don't think your churn's going to be 4%. I think it's going to be 8%. If you already know, because you've messed around with your model, that like a churn of 8%, you still look great, then cool. Like give the investor that win and say, yeah, okay, my churn's 8%. If you know that that makes your model look really bad, don't put in that 8%. So why do you think it's 8%? The industry average is 4%. Like, I don't think it's going to be that. So essentially know what fights to pick, and then speak their language to the extent to which you can communicate that you understand an income statement, balance sheet, and cash flows. You know how they work, at least at a high level. Like you can communicate that you understand finance. Like that will make the investor feel a lot more comfortable, because they understand how important that is for the company's chances of success. So that it'll just help them get there with the trust and the confidence. But that's all I got. So definitely hope this was helpful for y'all. And like I said before, I make myself very available for this kind of stuff if it is helpful. So you'll get a bunch of resources from Elizabeth. Please hit me up if I can add value. Definitely hit me up if you have any interest in the product. And we've got 10 minutes here, so I'm happy to answer any kind of questions that y'all may have. I know we also had some questions that were submitted before the talk as well. So if we don't have questions, we could also draw from that list. But yeah, that's all I got. Ask away if there's anything that you want to ask.
I have a quick question. First of all, thank you so much for this. This was a gem of information. How can people work with you? Because I'm like, wow, this seems awesome and fairly easy to understand or walk through, or it makes it fairly easy. How can people work with you if they're interested, or how can they utilize this?
Yeah, well, I definitely appreciate that question. And the first thing I'll say to that is like, I'll send all the resources to Elizabeth. So from a spreadsheet perspective, you'll have those resources. You can use them for free. And if I can be of value additionally to that at a personal level, email me and we'll triage that. If you're interested in the software, there is a very specific way that we work. So we sell annual subscriptions to the software. It comes with a white glove onboarding. So it would essentially look like you emailing me and saying, hey, yeah, I want to become a customer of Forecastr. We would assign you a startup financial analyst, someone who's built a bunch of financial models. They would actually work with you over a 30-day period where you get an unlimited amount of support hours. They actually work with you in the software to construct the financial model based on your input and make sure you get a great financial model. And then beyond that, first 30 days, it's a self-serve product. So you have an account, you're logging into Forecastr just like you'd log into your CRM or your whatever, and you are managing the model from there. But we're always here. We're here for support, email and live chat for free, phone and video for reasonable rates. So that's kind of how we work. Just so everybody knows, the price is $2,000 a year at market. We always offer 25% off though to the communities that we work with. So for anybody as a part of Grid 110, you'd be able to get the product for $1,500 a year. So that's kind of how it works. $1,500, 30 days of white glove onboarding, get a great model, and then yeah, you kind of manage it from there. Carrie says, and hopefully I said that name right, so sorry if I didn't. What was the most difficult financial question you got from investors for your current company? How did you respond? Okay, by far for me, it was around our annual contract value. So I'm an annual subscription business. At the time, we were only charging $1,000 a year, and now we're charging $2,000. That's still in what's considered the death zone with respect to businesses like mine that have a white glove onboarding and that have a sales cycle in as a part of it. So like people don't just sign up and self-serve their way into the product. Like there's actually an inside sales process that I run where I have to go close a customer. And in the annual SaaS world, if your ACV, it's called annual contract value, is between 1 and 5,000 a year, you're in this death zone where it's very hard to scale the business because the resources that you need to sell and onboard kind of outpace to some extent the amount of capital you're getting from that price point. And so the most difficult question I got was, how are you going to get out of that? Like, how are you going to, like, you're in the death zone. How can I be confident as an investor that that's not going to screw your business? My answer was through the financial model. I could actually present to them, and I can kind of show you here. Like, I can show in the model, you know, if I go to my assumptions and I look at, you know, well, I guess I got to go out of years to months here. I can actually go and say, look, like, yeah, right now we're just selling for 1,000 to 2,000 a year, but we've got these other product tiers that we're offering growth and scale at a later date. You know, growth is going to start at a price point of $5,000. It's going to go up to 10. Scale is going to start at a price point of 10,000. It's going to go up to 25. These are later stage companies. So I'm using the model to make the case that this entry level price point is simply that. We're going to scale beyond that. And that's kind of how you want to answer these questions for investors. You get that tough financial question, the model should have the answer. And so if you go to the model and you leverage it in your answer, it really communicates to the investor that, oh, wow, like, this isn't just made up. Like, he's actually thought about this. He's actually modeled this. And, oh, look at the numbers. Wow, that looks like a really nice business. So yeah, great question. Fun question. How many hours have you saved your customers from having to create their own Excel sheets? That is a great question. I don't know the answer to that question, but I would say that it on average takes me about 5 to 10 hours to complete a Excel-based financial model for a client back before we had Forecastr. So I would say if I do it pretty darn quick and it takes somebody else, you know, 20 hours and we've got 135 customers, then I reckon that is somewhere in the ballpark of 2,700 hours saved. Although that is not really, I mean, they have to spend some time. So they probably spend 2 or 3 hours. So I don't know, maybe 2,000. Any other questions? I know one I really liked that came in before was around scenarios. So like, you get the model done. How do you, like, you know, shit happens. And so like, how do you represent different scenarios in the model? In Excel, there's not a great way to do it, but what you need to basically do is like build your model like we have here, and then go file, make a copy, you know, make a copy of the model, save it as, you know, conservative case or aggressive case or best case, change the assumptions and save it, you know, and just do that as many times as you want to run different scenarios. In Forecastr, it's a little bit easier where you have a drop down. You can hit a little clone icon here. You can basically copy the model. Same process. You change the assumptions, change the name, but they all live here in like a vertical list. So you can flip back and forth fairly easily. And at some point, you'll be able to actually like hit compare and see them represented visually on a graph, like the differences and stuff like that. So yeah.
Quick question, Stephen. Thank you. During the due diligence process, you know, the investors usually ask for several different types of, you know, documents. And I'm just curious to know if Forecastr provides, I guess, specific links to different parts of the financial model. So like, you know, if they ask for the balance sheet, can you just, you know, get a specific link to that sheet? If they ask for, you know, P&L, like, can you get a specific link to that, et cetera? So that way you can kind of organize it in a way for them that is pretty clean over email, especially now that everything's remote. Yeah, great question. Well, I would say it's a great feature idea for us. You can't do that right now. So thank you for that. You're welcome. Yeah. Right now, what you can do is you can essentially give an investor access, and you can give them access to just like to the model. So they can like click that link like you would a Google Doc, come into the model. It's view only. And they can like, if they wanted to see the income statement, they can click the financials and view it. Or if they wanted to see the balance sheet, they can click to the balance sheet and view it. But there's no way to say, hey, I just want to give this investor access to like just my income statement or just my P&L. They click that link, they just come to that.
I think that's a good idea.
Awesome. Sweet.
Yeah. Let's see. If you have both B2B and B2C models, how should you segment them properly in the spreadsheet? Great question. Super hard. Can be. I don't say I don't oversell it or whatever, but can be hard when you have different segments. So what you want to do basically is think through that revenue formula. If you have B2B, how do you sell those customers? How do you monetize those customers? That should be represented as a track. If it's B2C, totally separate. How do you acquire those customers? How do you monetize them? And so in your customer acquisition, you may have two sections. You may have B2C customer acquisition, B2B customer acquisition, then B2C revenue and B2B revenue. And you'd represent all that separately. And then on the income statement, you would, put it together and you'd say, revenue from B2C, revenue from B2B. And it's nuanced. It depends on your specific business and how those things interact. But generally speaking, if you have different customer segments with different acquisition and monetization methods, they should be represented separately in the model. Sophia asked, can this be applied to nonprofits as well? Absolutely. Nonprofits are nothing more than a business. A nonprofit is absolutely a business that has revenue in the form of donations and grants and all sorts of things like that. It has expenses in all the same categories, people, rent, whatever. It either makes money or loses money. There's cash flow, all that kind of stuff. So absolutely, nonprofits, same deal. Your customer acquisition just might look like, how do you drive donations, or how do you get grants, or how do you get, big donors or whatever. But yeah, that's a great question.